speaker is a very prominent professor, and we want to thank him. He came all the way from Germany to see us. And this is Professor Detlev Doherr. And our professor is in informatics and geoinformatics at the University of Applied Sciences in Offenburg, Germany since 1990. And what I find unique about Dr. Doherr is I really like Professor Doherr about his employment, because he is very unique because he was at the German rock, salt, and potash industry. And since we're talking about geology, that's geology, see? And he integrated it, and he was also developing a geographical information system for mining and exploration together with IBM. And he serves now as a professor beginning in 1990, so it's over 2 decades. And so he's doing great in that. He said he's very happy where he is, and his current interest is to include knowledge-based computing, information technology, and history of natural sciences. So I want to welcome him, a warm welcome. Please give him a warm welcome today, and he'll be happy to come up here.
Welcome today to this keynote, and I try to start my computer. Unfortunately, it's not my computer, but I think it is running. So I prepared a little presentation for you. Okay, here we are. So thank you so much for this opportunity to be here in Orlando at this very nice conference. And this is a very, very good situation for me to present something about my research work in Germany, which we are doing since more than 2 decades now. And well, I will do my best to explain the visions of the German scientist Alexander von Humboldt and his sketch of nature, which he found by discovering the nature's phenomena as interactions, interconnectedness, and variety. This could be the title of this conference. So I will focus on possible influences to recent technological progress and to our worldview. This work may give a contribution to the question how we can adequately reflect information in their complexity and ask questions how original or how artificial their constructions of nature were. Let me see this one. No. I told you it's not my computer. It's an ongoing challenge, of course, to understand the nature and to evaluate trends to predict the future. Just the technical progress of information technology and the related influences to national sciences, ecology, economy, and society are subject of recent scientific research. But sometimes it is valuable to listen to intellectuals even from past centuries. Almost forgotten today, at least in the English-speaking world, Alexander von Humboldt was described as the most famous man and one of those wonders of the world in his days. His name is still present everywhere, from the Humboldt Current in the Pacific or in North America, where several counties, towns, and geographic locations located named after him. What can we do nowadays for a better understanding of Humboldt's sketch of nature? What can we do to improve our own worldview? Let's focus first on our progress of computer technologies. Globalization in information technology enables borderless communication by computer networks, which is a digital data transfer. Computers support human communication, which is visual more than textual. Nowadays, we can hardly distinguish between news and fake news. Social networks, messenger services are much faster than printed press, but are they authentical and reliable? Internet enhances digital democracy or leads to 1984. George Orwell gave some example of the vision of anti-democratic use of technology. Unconditioned respect for the right of informal self-determination should be among our most basic principles, but is almost ignored in social networks. We still have very little success in the field of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Maybe we will be more successful in the future, who knows? But the human brain is still superior to artificial intelligence when it comes to pattern recognition, analogs, and heuristic thinking. Knowledge bases are often identified as workflow support databases. High sophisticated algorithms combined with detailed statistical analysis of patterns and advanced calculations support human decision-making, but it's not a substitute for responsible decisions at all. Well, only a few people would confidently enter a self-flying plane, knowing that the pilot will remain at the airport. If the operating system is Windows, possibly nobody would enter. What's about Bill Gates? He must enter. Okay, why Humboldt? Let's check some main aspects of Humboldt's legacy. Who was this man? Humboldt was born in 1769 into an aristocratic family, but he later left his life of privilege to explore Latin America for 5 long years, a voyage that made him legendary as a discoverer. He ventured deep into the mysterious rainforest in Venezuela, full of insects, poisonous animals, and greedy carnivores. He climbed up volcanoes in the Andes and to see the burning lava inside those volcanoes. Even as a 60-year-old, he traveled more than 10,000 miles to the remotest corners of Asia. He visited Cuba and Mexico, traveled to Washington for a meeting with Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson pronounced him the most scientific man of his age. Charles Darwin said that Humboldt was the reason he boarded his beagle, and German's famous poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe declared that spending a few days with this man was like having lived several years. Goethe created the figure Dr. Faust, who is speaking for us all, desperately wanted to discover what holds the world together at the core. And his friend Humboldt started his travels to the Americas exactly to find an answer. Nature as a great whole one. Humboldt was the first in the tradition of viewing a unity between animate and inanimate world. He insisted on the value of senses, observation, experience in understanding the world as a whole, and he promoted the idea of the unity of nature. He pronounced, the principal impulse by which I was directed was the earnest endeavor to comprehend the phenomena of physical objects in their general connection and to present nature as one great whole, moved and animated by internal forces. What a concept. He additionally pointed out the harmony of nature. I shall collect plants and fossils, make astronomical observations with the best of instruments. It is not the main purpose of my journey. In short, I must find out the harmony of nature. He published a detailed narrative of travels, constantly integrating his observations and data from various perspectives and disciplines. So he founded the Humboldtian science, which is the accurate, measured study of widespread but interconnected real phenomena in order to find a definite law and dynamic cause. Humboldt believed in the importance of precise description of observations to better detect processes and phenomena. Those collected data are the basis for his scientific understanding and his idea of nature. Well, even after 200 years, Humboldt's writings are gaining increasing attention because of his efforts to comprehend nature within the context of interaction and dynamic processes. This concept is all-encompassing. All facts considering view of the world makes it insufficient to simply try and learn from digitized versions of his work. The consideration of detail in many notes, images, cross-references is requiring an adequate document which is hardly a printed or scanned book, but a hypertext document in terms of internet technology. So I say sorry to Google Books, but you imagine this is not an adequate document to learn the lesson from Humboldt. Did we learn our lesson, or do we really know enough about the internal forces of the world? Well, Humboldt's approach we can evaluate now: the technology progress of computers influencing our daily life and our worldview. So let us check some aspects of Humboldt's sketch of nature. While Humboldt's consideration of details is done in a myriad of notes and cross-references that can be seen in his travel diary by marked blocks in the image on the right side of this PowerPoint. Humboldt's personal narrative of travel, this was the name of his volumes, often strays from a strictly chronological order, whereas it is in an itinerary. But his return from the 5-year-long journey to the Americas, Humboldt conducted research and often inserted discourses or articles of various lengths, which are sometimes disrupting the sequence of his travel reports. We built a web portal and a digital library containing all text and images, including information technology, to discover Humboldt's visions and to publish that under the name Humboldt Digital Library on Internet. You may Google that address if you like. The user can follow the travel route and get information about locations which Humboldt described in detail. The basis of this dynamic system is a Google map with place marks containing hyperlinks to relevant text paragraphs from books inside the digital library. Another thing of the automatic recognition of the place names, which I already demonstrated in one of the collocated sessions on Wednesday. Nowadays, scientists are trying to understand and to predict the global consequences of climate change. Humboldt's interdisciplinary approach to science and nature becomes more relevant than ever. He refused to be tied on one discipline and insisted that all and everything was linked: humans, plants, oceans, geography, geology, atmospheric changes, temperature, and so on. Humboldt's nature was indeed a global force. The study of the interrelationship between animate and inanimate world, that is called ecology, became a subject of methodical investigation over the last century, until now. But Humboldt is regarded as a pioneer who promoted a new approach to science through extensive expeditions and writings. Nothing, not even the tiniest insect, was looked at on its own. In this great change of causes and effects, Humboldt said, no single fact can be considered in isolation. When nature is perceived as a web, its vulnerability also becomes obvious, even from the today's perspective. So Humboldt defined the basis of the very modern concept of sustainability and sustainable developments as well. Comprehension as nature as one great whole. This is the key question to understand Humboldt's documents. But the complexity and interconnectedness of information in Humboldt's works are neither visible in his writings nor in document-oriented digitized context. Humboldt argued that the new and old world are the same geological age. The same succession of rocky layers appears in both hemispheres, he wrote. The rock formations in the mountains of Peru date from the same periods as their counterparts in the Swiss Alps. The entire globe appears to have experienced the same catastrophes, said Humboldt, 200 years before. But he had no clue about the modern concept of plate tectonics and the internal forces, which are hot convection cells moving continental plates against each other. He knew that he couldn't find answers to all of these questions, but accepted incomplete answers as a scientific issue. Humboldt insisted that mankind in course of time had developed different worldviews and value systems are equaled each other. The numeral system which the Incas used was complicated as ours, and their gardens were as good as the great gardens of the English countryside. Here Humboldt must have shocked many readers on one side of the channel in Europe. And he was never tired to telling stories and tales. Guano, the national fertilizer that European businessmen desperately searched for importing to Europe, became a key metaphor for Humboldt. In the future, the excrements of the new world would secure the survival of the old continent. For Humboldt, Cuba was a microcosm of the new world. Foreseeing the upcoming social problems, he called for social and economic reform. Because he wrote against slavery and slave trade, the book became most controversial of Humboldt's publication in its days. Humboldt contributes to geology were based mainly on the study of geology at the University of Göttingen, Germany, and additionally to his attentive studies of the volcanoes of the New World, because there was an ongoing dispute about the origin of rocks and the origin of the planet Earth. Neptunism proposed that the Earth was originally consisted of water. The water contained material which settled out of suspension in a process of sedimentation to form the core of the planet. One theory. A rival theory was the Plutonism. Rocks were formed in fire, affected by a rock cycle in which rocks were affected by erosion, reformed, and uplifted by heat and pressure. Humboldt showed that the volcanoes fell naturally into linear groups, presumably corresponding with subterranean fissures. By his model of the origin of igneous rocks, he contributed to the theory of Plutonism, which is the accepted model of the origin of rocks and the planet Earth, by the way. Let's focus on knowledge management. It is actually an astonishing fact that Humboldt had the vision of hypertextuality and interconnectedness, and it drove him nearly to a distraction that he had no options to order or structurize his publications in a form that properly could reflect his thoughts, and he had no laptop available. Humboldt always spanned a network of texts, subtexts, and pictures to imitate nature itself, just because he recognized this structure in every relation between animals and plants. An example, you could see some data of the plant Lobelia, described and illustrated in different forms, marked by the red cycles and arrows in this PowerPoint slide. Just a simple question. How can we find those data by an internet search? Can we detect the interconnection there? This requires consequences for a digital library and even for Google Books. Sorry for that, because the future libraries should protect our right to know and right to remember, as Stuart Brand, the president of the Long Now Foundation, expressed. But as shown, the interconnectedness is not visible in printed or scanned documents, even in the era of internet and hypertext transfer protocols. Many professors like me would tell the same story. Most students simply confuse Google with knowledge. But nobody could find knowledge or comprehension in search machines. The students searched for terms, received a list of thousands of hits, and were happy about the successful action. But what is the dimension of successful? Is it measured in the number of hits? Or is it the ranking in the Google lists, which is probably driven by commercial interest? I'm considering this question as a question of artificial intelligence, reaching the higher order thinking skills which are part of the Bloom's taxonomy, used to classify educational learning objectives into levels of complexity and mastery, named after Benjamin Bloom, 1956, who possibly knew Humboldt's works, but certainly had no idea about internet and Google. As a professor, I agree with the definition of this taxonomy. Knowledge as the ability to recall information. The second level of thinking is comprehension. Comprehension is understanding. The next level is application, which is the ability to apply the learning subject in a new and different scenario. We made several tests how a computer could analyze digital text. We detected options of creating a virtual information network to detect and excerpt location names of Humboldt's travel routes and to classify text information as information objects. But we never ever reached the step from information to technology, to knowledge, because the computer never understood the link between the travel route on the one side and the activities combined with the Humboldt's worldview. So, the computer is a tool. We created a portal containing all documents of Humboldt in several translations and improved the virtual network by adding search functions, not only for internal but for also external archives. Technologically, we are dealing with objects which can be formally named and classified by computer processes defining ontological types, properties, and interrelationships. You can see a schema of the running system in the PowerPoint. The system checks what to do with the search request and in which form the result should be presented. The result can be aligned in the resulting table list of the portal or the presentation of the archive's output by accessing to a requested archive. The computer became a tool to search and identify information, but it's far away to be a solution finder to give reliable answers to simple questions like, can we interpret the population of turtles at the Orinoco as an environmental indicator? It is not the key question of Humboldt's worldview, but it's a very excellent example and a challenge really for information technology. Well, do we really know much about the internal forces of the world? As a geologist, I would hesitate to give an educated guess. Using Humboldt's approach, which lessons can we learn about the technological progress of computers influencing our daily life and our worldview? Sitting in a metro and watching young people who are using their tablet PCs with crazy games or monster hunting, I ask myself, is that what technological progress for more than 10,000 years is for? Playing around and chasing monsters? What consequences do we expect for the future? Well, Humboldt published his work in 29 volumes and numerous essays. He wrote, he devised maps and charts and whatever else what was needed in loving detail and invested a fortune for the publication. Armchair explorers lapped up his adventures and poets, presidents, and painters sought out his books, delighting in writings that reflect the adventure of Enlightenment thought. The question remains if that was just taken as entertainment or scientific pursuit. To do justice to Humboldt's legacy, you need precise knowledge of natural processes. This includes a personal impression of nature and visions, which inspired many painters like Frederick Edwin Church to illustrate possible views as paintings. Oops. Want to go back? No, it's not my computer, I told you. We accept unfortunately, I need a mouse click. Here we are, yeah. We accept the visions of Humboldt to discover the internal forces and the connectivity of nature as recent concepts. But a lot of processes remained undiscovered in his days. His sketch of nature was incomplete and only partially understood, which was very clear to Humboldt. He pronounced that this work is uncompleted, even when he named his book Cosmos. For example, Darwin created his evolution theory, which is the notion that all life is related and had descended from a common ancestor. He used Humboldt's books as a kind of catalogue and expressed in the letter from 1832, "Formerly I admired Humboldt. I now almost adore him." So it is obviously too remarkable and continuously running progress of findings and models of scientific worldview. Understanding of nature. Humboldt described the observations and phenomena very detailed and defined his worldview with a scientific approach. He wouldn't have been ready to manipulate the environment to get comprehensive processes because of the lack of complete understanding of nature. He expressed that not even the tiniest insect is isolated in his own. In this great chain of causes and effects, no single fact can be considered in isolation, he said 200 years before. When nature is perceived as a web, its vulnerability also becomes obvious. Coming back to the environmental questions, as we know from the chaos theory, change of parameters in the system may cause a fatal disruption. We developed computer tools which are extremely useful to search for Humboldt's precise descriptions, accurate measurements, and ecologic and environmental studies, but we cannot recognize the simplest phenomenon by artificial intelligence. No algorithm can be a solution finder of the global questions, even in the scientific view of nature. You can see here the online accessible application of our Google Earth tool containing Humboldt's travel route locations, descriptions, and map as georeferenced information on the Google Earth scenery. Even the interactive hyperlinks of every marked location to the description text paragraph in Humboldt's writings are extremely useful for us to understand Humboldt's observations, but cannot answer to our questions of global interest. So, I will come to my conclusions. We described aspects of Alexander von Humboldt's works and the Humboldtian science in their implications to our worldviews. And we accept Humboldt's visions to discover the internal forces and the interconnectivity of nature as modern concepts of representative knowledge bases and semantic web structures. So we created Humboldt Digital Library with implemented methods to provide his documents and links to relevant internet sources as a kind of digital library since the year 2001. But printed or scanned books are not appropriate to reflect the complexity and the interconnectedness of information. And we are stuck with the automatic evaluation of information and creation of digital knowledge by computers. We have got theoretical models and statistical approaches available, analytical solutions and numerical results, but we cannot find resilient algorithms as solution finders for the global questions, even in the scientific view of nature as one whole, where everything is interconnectedness. So, we remain incomplete in our understanding of nature. Thank you so much.